Come, let us recite from the Tao Te Ching and then savor effortless meditation. Oops, that's the wrong button. Here we go. The Tao is called the Great Mother. Empty yet inexhaustible, it gives birth to infinite worlds. It is always present within it. It is always present within you. You can use it any way you want. You know, I'm not sure if I'm on the right page. I just want to double check something real quick. Please bear with me. Okay, I'm on the right chapter. That's good to know. Thank you for bearing with my double check. When it comes to understanding the Tao Te Ching, it is important to liberate ourselves from the preconceptions created by often well-meaning, stupid white men. These are the bozos who will tell you that the Tao Te Ching is all about reconciling and balancing yin and yang. That sounds great until you actually read the book, maybe a few times. If you content yourself to reading 4 chapters of the Tao Te Ching a day, every day, you'll be surprised how many times you can get through the book and begin seeing patterns. And one of the patterns is that we're always taught, or we were frequently admonished, to always choose yin, always rely on yin. That is strongly inferred here, describing the Tao not as the father, but as the mother. In many patriarchal metaphysical systems, there's a talk of an all-father, or a father god, or a heavenly father, but not in a matriarchal system. And the context makes it very clear that this is not to be taken literally, but often figuratively. So it's not our job to think of the Tao as a celestial entity, but rather a mechanism that by which we go through life in a very distinct manner. And to show the manner more clearly, what I'm going to do is switch over to a set of visual aids. Now, both this text and the visual aids are available for free download as PDFs. Everything I do is free. There are no paywalls, there are no hidden agendas, there are no hidden programs. Everything is right up front. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingling way. What could that suckiness look like? It could look like most of us, including myself, being conditioned by society, being conditioned by genetics, by our survival impulse, to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. It's Paul the Apostle wrote in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and I paraphrase, "When I was a child, I acted as a child, I thought as a child, but now I reasoned as a child, but now as an adult I put childish things away." Hey, most of us were born naked, screaming, and covered in filth. but we no longer live that way. We understand that the way we are as a newborn infant is not the way we are now. And although it's perfectly appropriate for a newborn infant to be in high survival instinct mode, as we mature through toddlerhood and tweenhood and teenhood, if all goes well, we activate our circuitry to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Not as an agenda, but as an involuntary state of being. Some of the greatest physicists and neuroscientists agree that there is no free will. There is just a very complex web of non-spooky interdependence. It's no accident that you're here today hearing these words. Nothing spooky about it. It's just dumb stinking luck. It's very tough to reinforce our arrogant worldview in light of the fact that we're just lucky. We didn't choose in which country to be born. It just happened. We didn't choose our parents. It just happened. And sometimes that's relatively lucky. Sometimes that's relatively unlucky. But recognizing that makes it much easier to have empathy for others. In fact, a litmus test in conversation with someone who's been successful is you ask them, are you smart? Yeah, I'm smart. Do you work hard? Yeah, I work hard. Are you lucky? And they'll pause. And if they say, yeah, I'm lucky, then they still have some humility. If they say, no, I'm not lucky, I'm talented and work hard, then you know that they're turning to the dark side. When we are controlled, when our choices and our utterances and our deeds are under the sway of these survival-like tendencies to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, we find ourselves in a downward spiral where we begin presenting with symptoms of depression and triggering our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression. Fortunately for you and I, we evolved an opposite mechanism. Yes, every time we inhale, we have evolved to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, described as the sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly, which is the opposite of being rigid and controlling. It has evolved to help us to notice mind's antics of perception, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. The full spectrum of human experience, including the external and internal, the physical and mental, the pleasurable and painful, the interesting and boring, the glorious and grotesque. Well, what are we to do with that which we notice? Every time we exhale, oopsie, let's see here. Whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the bottom bit and the top bit of that same spinal cord. These two bits are known as the parasympathetic nervous system. They evolved to help us physically relax and mentally release. Doing this not only makes us more peaceful, but it calms our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression, as well as gently stimulates our anterior cingulate gyrus, which functions as the hub of our mirror neurons you guessed it, the seat of empathy. So the highest love is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of simply mindfulness and meditation. And we're already wired to practice mindfulness and meditation. And so as we go through life, we find ourselves either actively competing against our autonomic nervous system or passively cooperating with it. After a lifetime of conditioning to do the opposite, how do we passively, what is the easiest, most sustainable, most efficient way to passively cooperate with our autonomic nervous system? Simple, totally simple. During each inhalation, each time we feel our lungs swell with air, silently and mentally we could recite the verb watch. Just on the clock app. There we go. And each time we exhale, each time we feel our chest gently sink, as we exhale silently and mentally, we can recite the verb rest. And so the great irony is mindfulness and meditation is as simple as passively watching and resting in coordination with our body's natural processes. And for a greater irony, consider this. From the point of view of yin, enlightenment is simply getting so good at the Buddha's Eightfold Path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. So here's the wild thing. 8 seems like an overwhelming number for those of us with only 5 digits per hand. However, the more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more the remaining 6 folds of the path, awareness of change, kindness of intention, communication, conduct, and commerce, the ability for our choices, utterances, and deeds to flow from the effortless effort of centered spontaneity, all these happen automatically and effortlessly. Perhaps that is why the Buddha explained in his famous discourse upon the 4 bases of mindfulness that one could master this path in as little as 7 days. All this simply from cooperating with our autonomic nervous system. Not from conquering it, not from controlling it, but from gently, acquiescently cooperating. When I was but an infant, the Beatles sang mockingly of revolution. Of course, they were millionaires at the time and probably weren't tapped into, were no longer aware of class consciousness, which is tragic. But they did bring up a good point. If you want money for people, if you want guns for people with minds that hate. And so, is there a way to move forward? To move away from the precipice of physical, economic, and ecological destruction without indulging hate? And in the latter chapter of the Tao Te Ching, we are taught that the wise, there's a time for peace and a time for war. And the wise go to war not with bloodlust, not with joy, but with solemnity, like someone attending a funeral. Consider, if you will, antibiotics. It has been said that in the human body there are more non-human cells than human cells. There are more bacteria cells than there are components. Oh, I think I've got volume going on my monitor, which is really disorienting. Okay. So, and that's fine, but occasionally there are pathological bacteria. And if they are not dealt with, we can develop sepsis, which will kill us. Not only giving us a slow, gruesome death, but undermining our ability to ever be of service to anybody else ever again. And so a doctor will often prescribe antibiotics, either oral or intravenous, to kill some of that bacteria with the hope of saving the entire body as a system, or the majority of the body as a system. Sometimes people get injury or have diseases that create gangrene in the extremities. And once again, to prevent sepsis, there needs to be an amputation. No one joyfully amputates anything, but sometimes heroic efforts are required. Once again, not from hate, not from bloodlust, but with the sobriety of protecting. Not as an angry father, but as a protective mother. And you might say, well, you know, a mama bear can be pretty fierce. Yes, but she does it not out of hate, but out of protecting her cubs. Because that is how she has evolved to do. We have evolved to... Evolution is all about procreating, gestating, delivering, and nurturing the next generation. That is simply how evolution works. And so, as we watch the news, and we should watch the news, as we watch the news and see countries that were once surreptitiously inching their way towards fascism break out into a full sprint, as we see emboldened wealth inequality, as we see Gestapo on the streets, you know, denying people their constitutional rights of due process, we can fall into the one of two extremes of either being hyper passive, rocking back and forth and going to a good place, telling our past, repeating what's it called, platitudes that in the fullness of time the road arcs towards justice. No, it doesn't. In the fullness of time, we see it's a circle that keeps returning to fascism unless the causes of fascism are dealt with rationally, but incisively. I just turned 60. I'm probably won't live to see the glorious future promised by Gene Roddenberry of fully automated luxury space communism. Probably won't see that anytime soon. But maybe the next generation or the next generation could. I sure would love it if humanity was able to realize its potential for safety and creativity and kindness and wisdom. We can't do that if we are acting like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. Hyper competition, well, it reminds me of the saying made popular by Gandhi: an eye for the eye, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. The path of patriarchy is the path of competition. The path of matriarchy is the path of competition. The path of patriarchy is the path of cowardice. The path of matriarchy is the path of compassion. regardless of end goals, walking in compassion, walking in cooperation is infinitely more fulfilling than competition and cowardice and cruelty. Empty yet inexhaustible, it gives birth to infinite worlds. So, empty here is a metaphor. As we breathe in, our lungs fill. As we exhale, our lungs empty. As we breathe in and our lungs fill, we are able to perceive automatically. As we breathe out and our lungs empty, we automatically are wired to let go. And as we do so, that which we noticed during our previous inhalation begins to feel as non-graspable as empty space. And we notice that the word emptiness is being used figuratively. And as we look at nature, we see the processes of nature are passive. They are not active. Consider evolution. There is no person behind a keyboard programming our genes. What happens is we have a genetic trait. If the set of traits we have is useful to helping us survive to the point of reproduction, then those traits will be passed on. If our traits hinder survival or hinder reproduction, they will not be passed on. It's a very passive process. It works. It's highly inefficient. It's very, very protracted, but it's passive. As we look at the world all around us, the stellar life cycle, where dust coalesces, forms a star. The star burns through its fuel, then erupts, creates more stellar dust clouds, and the process is repeated. That's a passive process. Whether we're looking macroscopically at the universe without or microscopically at the universe within, we see that these mechanisms are passive. When we look at the life cycle of a dandelion, it's a passive process. The wind blows a dandelion seed. It latches somewhere. Perchance it isn't eaten. It gets enough water. It sprouts. It forms a plant. And the cycle continues, all passively. And so what we're being reminded here is this path of yin, this path of being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind doesn't seem macho, doesn't seem bold. I was raised I was in high school. I graduated high school in the mid 80s, and people were worshiping CEOs and worshiping yuppies and chanting the mantra, if it's to be, it's up to me. And those who were encouraging a passive path were mocked and derided. But that passive path of cooperating with humanity, of cooperating sustainably with nature, turns out to be not only the most sustainable, but in the long arc of time, the most productive. It is always present within you, this mechanism of yin, this mechanism, what the neurological basis of being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind is already hardwired within us. Let's return to those, visual aids. With every exhalation, not only do we access greater peace, not only do we calm as our amygdala calmed, but with each exhalation, we gently stimulate our anterior cingulate gyrus, which functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy. The peace and the love that make life meaningful all come from passively cooperating with our own autonomic nervous system. Now, some people say, well, if I'm passive, I won't do anything ever. Want to bet? We are wired in such a way that the more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds flow from, not from calculated contrivance, not from wild randomness, but from a centered spontaneity, enabling us to use all the components of our brain in the most sustainable manner, allowing us to be an asset to a community, using our interests, using our talents in the most sustainable way. I don't care how spiritual you think you are. You cannot sit in your hands for 36 hours. You're wired to get up and do something. That is why in virtually every spiritual system, whether it's Buddhism or Hawaiian Huna or something else, there is a physical component. For instance, I was shocked to learn many decades ago that in addition to studying and meditating, nuns and monks will often perform variations of squat thrusts that they described as Buddha bowing, which are excellent for your muscles and your heart and your lungs. The fact that this is not unique to one spiritual system, but many spiritual systems across many continents, across many years, infers that this is most likely a latent physiological need expressing itself universally. The safest, wisest thing we can do is to wisely, peacefully cooperate with our own autonomic nervous system. Doing so, we cannot help but have empathy for the denizens of our neighborhood, or city, or continent, or planet. We cannot help but act on that empathy. Whether that be helping a neighbor build a food forest, or helping a neighbor child with first aid, or being an ear to a neighbor who wants to get something off their chest. The ways in which we can apply our cooperation with our autonomic nervous system are myriad. Having completed our opening lesson, now we could shift gears. It is General Leia Organa Saturday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after about 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I have harnessed my autistic special interests as well as my ADHD hyperfocus to spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I could become your personal, nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friend. is to meditate like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the remainder of this early morning's live stream, let's meditate. Let us watch and rest in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. You're not in this alone. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist or Taoist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for intermittently I check for questions. If you, like me, are prone to arthritis, I recommend that every 15 minutes or so you gently adjust your legs. Meditation is not supposed to be an arduous ordeal where we force ourselves not to think or force ourselves to concentrate. It's basically a mental margarita where we kick back and watch, enjoy the show, and relax. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever kindness or cruelty we might have noticed during our previous inhalation feel as if they're melting into the simplicity of just intention. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever happiness or sadness we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel as if they were melting into the simplicity of just emotion. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever interest or boredom we might have noticed during our previous inhalation feels as if it was melting into the simplicity of just awareness. And so the question is not what do we experience, the question is what do we do with it? And the wisest thing is to simply watch and rest. If meditation is something we endure, then we were taught it wrong or we are practicing it wrong. If meditation is something that is fun and we can delight in, then we're probably doing it right. In his teaching on the 7 enlightenment factors, the Buddha insisted that both joy and peace were not products of enlightenment, but necessary ingredients thereof. Therefore, if the way we practice mindfulness and meditation makes us anxious or bums us out, as Bugs Bunny said to Daffy Duck, we've probably taken a wrong turn at Albuquerque. Peace and joy go together really well, like peanut butter and jelly. Peace and fear do not. Crankiness and joy do not. If you are on a path that is fueled by fear and rigidity, it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be peaceful. It's not going to be joyful in the long term. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 6.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's afternoon meditation class and group practice. I've got some medical appointments today, so we'll see how things play out. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.